Audrey Winters stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her emerald eyes betraying the anxiety that had been building all day. The delicate sapphire pendant at her throat, a 20th anniversary gift from her late husband, felt heavier than usual tonight. She smoothed her silk navy dress, chosen carefully for this important dinner, and took a deep breath. After 5 years of widowhood, tonight marked a significant milestone: meeting Maxwell Sinclair's mother. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, applying a fresh coat of lipstick. At 45, Audrey still turned heads with her elegant blonde waves and natural grace, but dating again after 23 years of marriage had left her feeling like an awkward teenager. Maxwell had swept into her life 3 months ago during a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital where she volunteered. His confident smile and attentive manner had slowly melted the protective ice around her heart, the first man to do so since David's death. The doorbell chimed through her modest but tastefully decorated townhouse. Audrey's heart fluttered as she hurried downstairs, heels clicking against hardwood floors. Opening the door revealed Maxwell in a tailored charcoal suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, holding a bouquet of cream-colored roses. "You look absolutely breathtaking," he said, his blue eyes warming as they took her in. "Thank you," she replied, accepting both the compliment and the flowers with a smile that reached her eyes. "Let me put these in water before we go." Maxwell followed her into the kitchen, leaning against the granite countertop as she arranged the roses in a crystal vase. "Mother is very excited to meet you," he said. "She rarely invites anyone to her home these days." "I'm honored," Audrey said, though her stomach tightened with apprehension. "Though I wish Cassie could have joined us from the start." Her daughter had promised to meet them at Victoria Sinclair's house, coming directly from her office downtown. "She'll be there," Maxwell assured her, checking his watch. "But we should get going. Mother is rather particular about punctuality." The ride to the affluent neighborhood across town passed in comfortable conversation, Maxwell's hand occasionally covering hers reassuringly. As his luxury sedan turned onto a tree-lined street of impressive homes, Audrey's phone vibrated with a text from Cassie. "Running a bit late. Start without me. Love you." "Everything okay?" Maxwell asked, pulling into a circular driveway of a stately Georgian-style home. "Just Cassie," Audrey explained, showing him the message. "She's running late." "See." Something flickered across Maxwell's face. Disappointment, perhaps? Before his charming smile returned. "Mother will understand. Shall we?" Victoria Sinclair was everything Maxwell had described. Elegant, poised, and formidable despite her 70 years. Her silver hair was swept into a perfect chignon, her posture impeccable as she welcomed Audrey with a cool assessment that made her feel like she was being appraised rather than greeted. "So you're the woman who's captured my son's attention," Victoria said, ushering them into a living room decorated with antiques that looked both expensive and authentic. "He speaks very highly of you." "Thank you for inviting me to your lovely home," Audrey replied, accepting a crystal flute of champagne from a tray that Victoria had waiting. She noticed Maxwell's mother wore no wedding ring, but did sport an impressive emerald that seemed to match her sharp, evaluating gaze. "Maxwell tells me you're an interior designer?" Victoria prompted, settling into a wingback chair while gesturing for them to sit on the brocade sofa. "Yes, I've had my own firm for 15 years now," Audrey explained. "I specialize in residential spaces, helping people create homes that truly reflect who they are." Victoria nodded, a tight smile on her thin lips. "Fascinating. And your daughter is in technology, I understand?" "Cassie, yes. She's a product development director at Nexus Innovations." Pride swelled in Audrey's voice. After David's death, Cassie had been her rock, and watching her daughter's meteoric professional rise had been a bright light during dark times. "She'll be joining us shortly," Maxwell added, his hand finding Audrey's knee in what seemed like a supportive gesture. Victoria's gaze lingered on that hand before she stood abruptly. "Well, we shouldn't let dinner get cold. I've prepared something special." The formal dining room featured a table set with fine china, crystal, and silver that gleamed under a vintage chandelier. A centerpiece of white orchids added understated elegance to the setting. As they took their seats, Victoria at the head of the table, Maxwell and Audrey on either side, Audrey couldn't help but wonder about the fourth-place setting. "For Cassandra," Victoria explained, following Audrey's gaze. "I do hope she arrives soon." "I'm sure she will," Audrey said, though a vague uneasiness had begun to settle in her stomach. Victoria disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a tureen of soup that sent a rich, aromatic steam into the air. "An old family recipe," she explained, serving Audrey first. "Wild mushroom bisque, with a special blend of herbs from my garden." Audrey noted that her bowl had a small decorative flourish on the rim, a delicate gold leaf pattern that wasn't present on the others. "How beautiful," she commented, indicating the design. Victoria's lips curved upward. "I save my best china for special guests." As Maxwell poured wine for everyone, the conversation turned to his work as an investment consultant. Audrey listened attentively, though she noticed Victoria checking her watch several times. Just as they were about to begin eating, Audrey's phone vibrated in her clutch. Excusing herself to check if it was Cassie, she was surprised to find 17 missed calls and a flurry of urgent text messages from her daughter. The most recent one made her blood run cold. "Pretend you're sick and leave right now. Don't eat anything. I'm 5 minutes away. Trust me." Audrey stared at her phone, her hands suddenly trembling. What could possibly have prompted such a frantic message? Cassie was level-headed and rational, not prone to dramatics or paranoia. "Is everything all right, dear?" Victoria asked, her voice honeyed with concern that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. Audrey began, her mind racing. She trusted her daughter implicitly. If Cassie was this alarmed, there had to be a reason. "Actually, I'm suddenly not feeling very well." Maxwell frowned, leaning toward her with apparent concern. "What's wrong? You were fine a moment ago." "I know, it's strange," Audrey said, placing her napkin beside her untouched soup. "Perhaps it's just nerves, but I'm feeling quite lightheaded and nauseous." Victoria and Maxwell exchanged a quick glance that sent a chill down Audrey's spine. There was something in that look. Disappointment? Irritation? Something darker? "Perhaps you should try some soup," Victoria suggested, her voice suddenly tight. "It has healing properties." "Mother's soup can cure anything," Maxwell added, with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the moment. His hand closed around Audrey's wrist. "Just a few spoonfuls." Audrey pulled her hand away gently but firmly. "I'm sorry, but I think I need some air. Would you mind terribly if we postponed? I'd hate to ruin the evening by being ill." Victoria's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "Nonsense. You're already here. At least taste the soup I prepared especially for you before making any hasty decisions." The emphasis on "especially for you" sent warning signals flaring through Audrey's mind. She pushed her chair back slightly. "Before we eat, might I use your restroom?" Maxwell stood immediately. "Of course. Down the hall, second door on the right." In the ornate bathroom, Audrey splashed cold water on her face, trying to make sense of Cassie's warning and the strange tension she now felt. The Sinclairs' insistence on her eating the soup suddenly seemed sinister rather than hospitable. She texted Cassie quickly, "In the bathroom." "What's happening?" The immediate response chilled her. "They're dangerous. I'll explain when I get there. Just get out." Heart pounding, Audrey composed herself and returned to the dining room, where Maxwell and his mother were engaged in a hushed, intense conversation that abruptly ceased when she entered. "Feeling better?" Victoria asked, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Actually, I think I should go home," Audrey said firmly. "I'm truly sorry to disrupt your evening." Maxwell stood, his charm suddenly seeming forced. "At least try the soup before we go. Mother worked on it all afternoon." "Perhaps another time," Audrey insisted, reaching for her purse. The sudden sound of breaking glass from somewhere in the house made all three of them freeze. Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly as she exchanged an alarmed look with her son. "What was that?" Maxwell asked, his voice sharp. Before anyone could investigate, the front door burst open and Cassie rushed in, her business attire disheveled, her face flushed with exertion and fear. "Mom!" she cried out, relief washing over her features upon seeing Audrey standing, apparently unharmed. "Cassandra," Victoria said coldly, "how lovely of you to finally join us, though it seems your mother isn't feeling well enough to stay." Cassie moved directly to Audrey's side, positioning herself slightly between her mother and the Sinclairs. "We need to leave! Now!" The steel in her voice brooked no argument. Maxwell stepped toward them, his previous warmth replaced by something calculating. "This is rather dramatic, isn't it? Audrey was just about to try my mother's special recipe." "No, she wasn't," Cassie said firmly, taking her mother's arm. "We're leaving." As they backed toward the exit, Victoria remained seated, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the tablecloth. "Such a shame," she murmured, her gaze fixed on Audrey with chilling intensity. "We had such plans for you, my dear." The last thing Audrey saw as Cassie pulled her through the door was Maxwell's face, transformed from the charming man she'd thought she knew into something predatory and cold. His final words followed them into the night. "This isn't over, Audrey. People like us always finish what we start." In Cassie's car, speeding away from the elegant house that now seemed like a beautiful trap, Audrey finally found her voice. "What just happened? How did you know?" Cassie's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I came early to check the place out. Something about him never felt right to me. I overheard them in the kitchen." She swallowed hard. "Mom, they were talking about poison. Arsenic in the soup. Your soup. They've done this before." Audrey felt the world tilt beneath her, the reality of how close she'd come to death crashing over her in waves of shock and betrayal. The man she'd begun to love after years of loneliness had planned to murder her all along, and if not for her daughter's intuition and courage, he would have succeeded. "We're going straight to the police," Cassie said, her voice steadier now as she navigated through the dark streets, putting distance between them and the Sinclairs. "They won't get away with this." As the adrenaline began to subside, leaving her shaking and nauseated for real now, Audrey reached across to squeeze her daughter's hand in wordless gratitude. The sapphire pendant at her throat, David's gift, seemed to pulse with warmth, as if her late husband had somehow reached across the divide to protect her through the love they'd created together. Their remarkable daughter. Detective Nathan Reeves had seen his share of disturbing cases in 23 years with the police force. But something about the Winters women's story raised the hair on his neck. He studied them across his desk in the precinct's interview room, the elegant mother still trembling slightly despite her composed exterior, and the fiercely protective daughter who hadn't left her side since they'd arrived an hour ago. "Let me make sure I understand," he said, reviewing his notes. "Ms. Winters, you've been dating Maxwell Sinclair for 3 months, after meeting at a charity event. Tonight was the first time you met his mother, Victoria, and your daughter overheard them discussing putting arsenic in your soup." Cassie leaned forward, her professional demeanor making her seem older than her 27 years. "I arrived early because something about Maxwell never sat right with me. I wanted to get a feel for them before my mother arrived." Her voice tightened. I heard Victoria say, "The arsenic works quickly, but not so quickly that suspicion will fall on us." Then Maxwell laughed and said, "By the time anyone realizes what happened, we'll be states away with her assets." Detective Reeves's expression remained neutral, though his eyes sharpened. "And you're certain that's what you heard? Word for word?" "Detective," Cassie replied evenly, "I have an eidetic memory. It's partly why I've advanced so quickly in my field. I don't misremember things, especially not when they involve threats to my mother's life." Audrey placed a calming hand on her daughter's arm. "There was something else," she added quietly. "When I was leaving, Victoria said they had plans for me, and Maxwell said, 'This isn't over,' and that People like them always finish what they start. She shivered despite the room's warmth. It sounded like a threat, like they've done this before. The detective nodded, making additional notes. We'll need to get a warrant to search their property and test that soup. In the meantime, I'd advise you both to stay somewhere other than your home, somewhere Maxwell doesn't know about. They can stay with me, came a firm voice from the doorway. All three turned to see a tall woman with short silver hair and a no-nonsense expression. I'm Helena Winters, she introduced herself to the detective. Audrey's sister-in-law. David was my brother. Audrey felt a rush of relief at the sight of her late husband's only sibling. Though they didn't see each other as often since David's death, their bond remained strong. Helena's lakeside cabin an hour outside the city would be the perfect refuge, secluded and unknown to Maxwell. Thank you, Detective Reeves said, standing to shake Helena's hand. That would be ideal. We'll need contact information, of course, but it's better if that location remains confidential for now. He turned back to Audrey. Ms. Winters, I need to ask, did you give Maxwell access to any of your financial information? Bank accounts, investment portfolios, property deeds? The question landed like a stone in Audrey's stomach. He helped me review some investment options last month. He saw my portfolio statements. He paused, the implications sinking in. And he has a key to my townhouse. I gave it to him last week when he offered to let in the plumber while I was at a client meeting. Reeves and Helena exchanged grim looks. We'll need to change your locks immediately, the detective said. And I'd recommend freezing your accounts first thing tomorrow, just as a precaution. I'll handle the financial aspects, Cassie said immediately. I have power of attorney for Mom's accounts since Dad died. Helena nodded approvingly. And I know a security specialist who can change the locks tonight and set up a temporary alarm system until this is resolved. As they worked out the logistics, Audrey felt oddly detached, as though watching the scene from a distance. How had her life unraveled so completely in a single evening? 3 hours ago, she had been nervously preparing to meet her boyfriend's mother, hoping for approval, perhaps even allowing herself to imagine a future where she wasn't alone anymore. Now she was planning her escape from the man who had apparently been plotting her murder since the day they met. Ms. Winters? Detective Reeves's voice pulled her back to the present. His expression had softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but there's something else I need to tell you. He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. I ran preliminary background checks on Maxwell and Victoria Sinclair while you were giving your statements. Their identities don't hold up to scrutiny. What do you mean? Audrey asked, a fresh wave of unease washing over her. The Maxwell Sinclair you know doesn't exist, at least not with the background he provided you. The social security number he's using belongs to a man who died 15 years ago. The investment firm he claims to work for has never heard of him. And Victoria Sinclair's property records show she only purchased that house 4 months ago. He paused. Right before Maxwell approached you. Cassie's expression hardened. So they targeted my mother specifically. This wasn't random. It appears that way, Reeves confirmed. We're still investigating, but my colleague discovered similar cases in 3 other states over the past decade. Mother-son con team ingratiates themselves with wealthy widows. Then the women mysteriously die, leaving new wills naming the boyfriend as beneficiary. Audrey felt her chest constrict. But I'm not wealthy. My design business does well, but I'm hardly rich. Helena and Cassie exchanged meaningful looks. Audrey, Helena said gently, David's life insurance policy was substantial, and the investment portfolio he left you has grown significantly over the past 5 years. Plus, you own your townhouse outright, Cassie added. To people like the Sinclairs, you'd be a very attractive target. The realization that she had been selected, studied, and pursued like prey made Audrey physically ill. She barely made it to the wastebasket in the corner before emptying the contents of her stomach. Helena was immediately at her side, rubbing her back soothingly as she had when they were younger women, and Audrey had been pregnant with Cassie, suffering from morning sickness. I'm sorry, she whispered, mortified. Don't be, Detective Reeves said kindly. Your reaction is entirely appropriate to the situation. Most people would be falling apart completely. He handed her a bottle of water. What we need to focus on now is keeping you safe while we build our case. Unfortunately, without physical evidence of the poison, we don't have enough to arrest them yet. So they just get away with it? Cassie demanded, outrage coloring her voice. They tried to murder my mother. Not get away with it, Reeves corrected. We're going to investigate thoroughly. If they've done this before, there will be evidence. Financial trails, communication records, possibly even toxicology reports from previous victims, if we can convince the authorities in other jurisdictions to exhume bodies. His expression was resolute. People like this get caught eventually. They make mistakes. Our job is to find those mistakes, while ensuring your mother stays safe. As they prepared to leave, Reeves pulled Audrey aside briefly. There's one more thing you should know, he said in a low voice. These types of perpetrators don't typically give up easily. Maxwell invested 3 months in setting you up. He won't simply walk away because the first attempt failed. What are you saying? Audrey asked, though she already knew the answer. I'm saying be vigilant. Don't return to your normal routine. Don't contact anyone who might inadvertently reveal your location. His eyes held hers steadily. He'll try again if he gets the chance. The drive to Helena's cabin passed in tense silence, broken only by practical discussions of what they needed to collect from Audrey's townhouse. They agreed it would be safest for Helena to retrieve essential items the next day, while Audrey and Cassie remained hidden at the cabin. I still can't believe I was so stupid, Audrey finally said as they turned onto the gravel road leading to Helena's secluded property. Moonlight filtered through dense trees, casting dappled shadows across the windshield. I thought I was finally moving on after David. Instead, I nearly got myself killed. This isn't your fault, Mom, Cassie said firmly from the back seat. Maxwell is a professional con artist. He makes his living by being believable and likable. Cassie's right, Helena added, steering carefully around a curve. David would never blame you for wanting companionship after 5 years. He'd just be grateful you have such an amazing daughter looking out for you. The mention of her late husband brought tears to Audrey's eyes. What would David think of all this? The practical, loving man who had been her partner for more than 2 decades would probably be furious that someone had tried to harm her, but he wouldn't judge her for seeking connection. Still, he couldn't help feeling she had betrayed his memory somehow by falling for Maxwell's lies. The cabin appeared ahead, a rustic 2-story structure nestled among towering pines. In daylight, it offered breathtaking views of the lake. Tonight, its isolation felt both comforting and slightly ominous. No one knows about this place except family, Helena assured them as she unlocked the heavy wooden door. David and I inherited it from our parents. It's not connected to your name in any way, Audrey. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, with knotty pine walls, a stone fireplace, and furniture designed for relaxation rather than show. Helena moved efficiently through the space, turning on lights, checking locks, and pulling extra blankets from a cedar chest. I'll get a fire started, she said. You two can take the main bedroom upstairs. I'll sleep down here on the pull-out couch. Cassie shook her head. I'll take the couch. I want to be near the door. Her expression made it clear this wasn't negotiable. Despite her corporate attire and polished demeanor, there was something fiercely primitive in her stance. A daughter prepared to defend her mother at any cost. Later, after Helena had gone to bed, and Cassie had finally succumbed to exhaustion on the couch, Audrey stood by the cabin's large picture window, gazing out at the moonlit lake. Sleep seemed impossible with her mind replaying every moment with Maxwell, searching for clues she should have noticed, red flags she had ignored, his too-perfect timing at the charity event, appearing just as she'd mentioned needing investment advice to a friend, his keen interest in her daily routine and financial arrangements, the way he'd expertly identified and played upon her loneliness, building her trust, with meticulous patience. It had all been calculated, a performance designed to position her for slaughter. A soft creak behind her made her turn sharply, heart racing, but it was only Cassie, awake again, and watching her with concern. "You should try to sleep, Mom," she said, coming to stand beside her at the window. "I don't think I'll ever sleep soundly again," Audrey admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Not the charming mask he wore for months, but what was underneath, the coldness in his eyes when you interrupted their plan." She shivered. "How did I not see it?" Cassie wrapped an arm around her mother's shoulders. "Because you're a good person, who assumes others are too. It's not a character flaw to expect basic human decency." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Did you love him?" The question pierced Audrey's heart. Had she loved Maxwell? Or had she simply loved the idea of him, the promise of companionship, the end of lonely dinners and empty evenings? "I thought I was beginning to," she answered honestly. "But now I wonder if I ever knew him at all. The real Maxwell, whatever his actual name is a stranger to me. A dangerous stranger." They stood in silence, the moonlight casting their reflections against the dark glass. Mother and daughter, so similar in their determination, yet so different in their approach to the world. Audrey with her artist's open heart, Cassie with her analytical mind and protective instincts. "Dad would be proud of you," Audrey said suddenly. "The way you handled everything tonight. You saved my life." Cassie's reflection smiled sadly. "I was just returning the favor. You and Dad gave me life. You protected me growing up. Now it's my turn." Her expression grew serious again. "We'll get through this, Mom. The detective will build his case. The Sinclairs will go to prison. And eventually, this will just be a terrible memory." Before Audrey could respond, a flash of light through the trees caught her attention. Headlights, moving slowly along the distant access road that led to the cabin. "Cassie," she whispered, grabbing her daughter's arm. "There's a car coming." Cassie immediately tensed, pulling Audrey away from the window. "It's probably nothing," she said, though her actions belied her words as she quickly turned off the living room lights. "Helena said the nearest neighbor is a mile away. Maybe they took a wrong turn." But the headlights continued their steady approach, cutting through the darkness with deliberate purpose. "Wake Helena," Cassie instructed, her voice low and urgent. "Tell her to call Detective Reeves. I'll check the doors and windows." "Beatty?" As Audrey hurried to the stairs, a terrible certainty settled in her stomach. Somehow, against all odds, Maxwell had found them, and this time, with his plans already exposed, he would have nothing to lose. The sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed through the silent cabin as Audrey shook Helena awake. "Someone's coming," she whispered urgently, the words catching in her throat. "A car, on the access road." Helena was instantly alert, years of living alone having honed her responses. "The gun!" she said, reaching under her pillow to retrieve a small revolver. Seeing Audrey's startled expression, she added, "David insisted I keep it here for protection. I know how to use it." Downstairs, Cassie moved silently from window to window, keeping to the shadows as she verified that all entry points were secured. The headlights had stopped advancing, now sitting stationary about 100 yards from the cabin, casting an eerie glow through the trees. "Any cell service?" Helena asked as she joined Cassie in the darkened living room. Cassie shook her head. "Barely one bar. I texted Detective Reeves our location, but I don't know if it went through." The three women huddled together in the kitchen, furthest from the windows, speaking in hushed tones. "It might not be them," Audrey suggested, though without conviction. "It could be a lost driver. Or one of your neighbors, Helena." "The Millers are in Florida until spring," Helena replied, "and no one else has any reason to be on this road at 2 in the morning." The car's engine suddenly cut off, plunging the forest into silence. Then came the unmistakable sound of a car door opening and closing, followed by footsteps on the gravel path. Helena raised the revolver, checking that it was loaded. "Upstairs," she whispered. "Both of you." There's a trap door in the ceiling of the main bedroom closet that leads to a small attic space. David and I used to hide Christmas presents there. We're not leaving you alone down here, Cassie protested. I'm not asking, Helena said, with the same steely authority that had defined her career as a high school principal before retirement. If it's Maxwell, he's after Audrey, not me. I'll be fine. A sharp knock at the front door made all three women freeze. Hello? Called a woman's voice, unmistakably Victoria Sinclair's cultured tones. I know you're in there, Audrey dear. We need to talk. Cassie's eyes widened in disbelief. They found us. How is that possible? Upstairs. Now, Helena repeated, her grip tightening on the revolver. Reluctantly, Audrey and Cassie crept up the stairs while Helena positioned herself in the living room, the gun held steadily in both hands, aimed at the front door. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, Victoria called. Maxwell is checking the perimeter as we speak. There's really nowhere to go. In the main bedroom, Cassie quickly located the trap door Helena had mentioned, pushing aside hanging clothes and using a chair to reach the ceiling of the closet. The small wooden door opened with a creak that sounded thunderous in the tense silence. You first, Mom, Cassie whispered, interlacing her fingers to create a step with her hands. Not without you, Audrey insisted. I'll be right behind you. I promise. The sound of breaking glass from downstairs settled the argument. Audrey quickly stepped into Cassie's hands and hoisted herself through the trap door into a cramped, dusty space, barely large enough for two people to lie flat. Cassie followed immediately after, pulling the chair up through the opening and then closing the trap door behind them, plunging them into complete darkness. They lay still, hardly daring to breathe, ears straining for sounds from below. The attic space smelled of cedar and old paper, with only thin slats in the roof peak allowing in minimal moonlight. Through gaps in the floorboards, they could see faint movements in the bedroom below. A gunshot shattered the night, followed by a woman's cry of pain. Helena! Audrey gasped, instinctively moving toward the trap door. Cassie's hand clamped firmly over her mouth while her other arm held her mother in place. We don't know what's happening, Cassie breathed against her ear. If we go down there without knowing, we could make it worse. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Through the floorboard gaps, they saw a flashlight beam sweep across the bedroom. They're not here, Maxwell's voice called down to his mother. Check the other rooms. More footsteps, doors opening and closing. The beam returned to the main bedroom, more methodically this time, examining corners, under the bed, inside the wardrobe. The closet! Victoria's voice directed from somewhere downstairs. She sounded strained, possibly injured. People always hide in closets. The flashlight beam entered the closet directly below them. Audrey held her breath, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain it must be audible through the floorboards. The beam lingered, moving slowly across the ceiling. For a moment, it illuminated the edges of the trap door, highlighting years of accumulated dust, except for the fresh handprints Cassie and Audrey had left moments ago. Well, well, Maxwell murmured. What have we here? Did you find them? Victoria called. I think they're playing hide-and-seek, Mother, he replied, a chilling playfulness in his voice. And I've just found their hiding spot. Cassie's hand tightened around her mother's in the darkness. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere to hide. The only exit was the trap door that Maxwell was now reaching for. In the faint moonlight filtering through the roof slats, Audrey saw her daughter's silhouette shift, positioning herself between her mother and the trapdoor, a human shield to the very end. The sound of splintering wood from downstairs made Maxwell pause. Mother? He called, suddenly alert. What was that? Instead of Victoria's reply, a deep male voice responded. Police! Freeze! Maxwell cursed, the trapdoor forgotten as he bolted from the closet. More voices joined the first, along with the sound of running footsteps, a crash, and a male cry of pain. Mom, stay here, Cassie whispered, already moving toward the trapdoor. I need to check on Helena. Before Audrey could protest, Cassie had slipped through the opening and disappeared into the bedroom below. Unable to remain hidden while her family might be in danger, Audrey followed, wincing as her stiff limbs protested the awkward descent. The scene downstairs was controlled chaos. 2 police officers had Maxwell face down on the floor, handcuffing him as he struggled and spat curses. Detective Reeves knelt beside Helena, who sat against the wall clutching her left arm, which was wrapped in a makeshift bandage fashioned from a kitchen towel. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. "She got away," Helena grimaced, seeing Audrey's questioning look. "Slipped out the back door when the police arrived. She's the one who shot me. Just a graze, thankfully. Her hands were shaking too badly for proper aim." "Your text came through," Detective Reeves explained to Cassie. "We were already en route, based on a tip from a gas station attendant. The Sinclairs stopped for fuel about 20 miles from here and asked directions to this lake." "How did they find us in the first place?" Audrey asked, still struggling to process the night's events. Reeves nodded toward Maxwell. "Ask him. He's facing attempted murder charges now. Might be willing to deal." Maxwell's handsome face was contorted with rage as the officers pulled him to his feet. When his eyes met Audrey's, the mask slipped back into place for just a moment. The charming, attentive man she had thought she knew. "Audrey," he said, his voice suddenly gentle. "This is all a misunderstanding. If you'd just let me explain." "Save it for your lawyer," one of the officers interrupted, steering him toward the door. "He had a tracker on your car," Detective Reeves said quietly to Cassie after Maxwell had been taken outside. "We found it when we arrived. Small device attached to your rear bumper. Military grade, not something civilians typically have access to." Cassie looked stricken. "So this is my fault. I drove us right to him." "No," Audrey said firmly, taking her daughter's hand. "None of this is your fault. If not for you, I would have eaten that poisoned soup and been dead hours ago." As paramedics arrived to treat Helena's wound, Reeves pulled Audrey aside. "We need to get you all to a secure location. Victoria is still out there, and she's clearly desperate." "How dangerous is she without Maxwell?" Audrey asked. "Potentially more dangerous," Reeves replied grimly. "Our background investigation suggests she's the driving force in their operation. Maxwell is the bait, but Victoria is the brains. And now she has nothing left to lose." Dawn was breaking by the time they reached the safe house, a nondescript apartment in a secure building owned by the police department. Used primarily for protected witnesses, it offered the anonymity and security they now desperately needed. Helena had been treated at the hospital and released, her arm bandaged but no serious damage done. "I'll have officers stationed outside round the clock," Reeves assured them. "Victoria won't get anywhere near you." Alone in the sterile apartment after Reeves departed, the 3 women sat in exhausted silence at the small kitchen table. The events of the past 12 hours seemed surreal, like a nightmare they couldn't quite wake from. "I still don't understand why they chose me," Audrey finally said. "There must be easier targets, women with more money and fewer connections." Helena and Cassie exchanged glances. "Actually," Helena said hesitantly, "there might be a reason. Something David and I never told you." Audrey looked up sharply. "What are you talking about?" Helena sighed deeply. "The family cabin isn't the only property David inherited from our parents. There's also a significant trust fund that passed to him, and now to you and Cassie. It's been managed by the family attorney all these years. David didn't want the money to change how you lived, so he arranged for it to remain untouched until you reached 50, or in case of emergency." "What?" Audrey stared at her sister-in-law in disbelief. "How much money are we talking about?" "With compound interest over the decades," Helena hesitated. "Several million." The room seemed to tilt under Audrey. "David and I struggled to make mortgage payments after Cassie was born. We put off vacations. We drove the same cars for 15 years. Why would he hide this from me?" "He wanted you both to value what you earned," Helena explained. "Our parents came from nothing and worked incredibly hard for their success. When they died, David was determined their grandchild would understand the value of hard work, not grow up as a trust fund kid. She reached across the table to squeeze Audrey's hand. He planned to surprise you on your 50th birthday, 5 years from now. He even wrote you a letter explaining everything, which the attorney keeps with the trust documents. Cassie looked equally stunned. Did Dad tell anyone else about this? Anyone who might have leaked the information? Helena shook her head. Just the family attorney, who's been with our family for 40 years, and me. She paused. And I mentioned it once to my doctor when I was updating my will after my cancer diagnosis 2 years ago. Your doctor? Audrey repeated. What was their name? Dr. Eleanor Prentice. She's retired now, but she treated our entire family for years. In fact, Helena added thoughtfully, she referred me to her replacement just before she retired, a Dr. Victoria Stanford. The three women stared at each other as the implications sank in. Victoria Stanford, Audrey whispered. Victoria Sinclair. I need to call Detective Reeves, Cassie said, already reaching for her phone. This changes everything. As Cassie stepped into the next room to make the call, Audrey tried to process this new information. The trust fund explained why she had been targeted so specifically, why such elaborate preparations had been made, but it also raised a disturbing possibility. Helena, she said slowly, if Victoria was posing as a doctor before becoming Victoria Sinclair, what if she's had multiple identities? What if she's been doing this for decades? Helena paled. You think she might be responsible for other deaths, beyond what the detective already suspects? I think, Audrey replied, a cold certainty settling in her bones, that we may have stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple con artist and his mother. And I don't think Victoria will stop until she either gets what she came for or she's behind bars. Cassie returned, her expression grave. Reeves is on his way back. They found something in Maxwell's car, a laptop with detailed files on at least 7 other women across the country, all widows, all with significant assets. She hesitated, all dead within 6 months of meeting him. The weight of those lives, women like Audrey, who had only been seeking connection after loss, pressed down on the room. 7 women who hadn't had a Cassie to save them. 7 families shattered by greed and calculated cruelty. He's going to cooperate, Cassie continued. Apparently, learning about the multiple murder charges has loosened his tongue. He's offering to turn on Victoria in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Will they make that deal? Helena asked. Reeves says it depends on how valuable his information is, Cassie replied, and whether it leads to Victoria's capture. Outside, the sky had lightened to a clear blue, the ordinary world continuing its rhythms despite the horror that had invaded their lives. Audrey moved to the window, keeping carefully to one side as Reeves had instructed. She's still out there, she murmured, scanning the street below where morning commuters hurried about their day, unaware of the predator potentially walking among them. Planning her next move, as if summoned by her thoughts, Audrey's cell phone, which Reeves had returned to her after confirming it contained no tracking software, chimed with an incoming text from an unknown number. This isn't over, Audrey. A mother always protects her son, and I always collect what I'm owed. The following week unfolded in a haze of police interviews, legal consultations, and sleepless nights. The safe house became a temporary command center as Detective Reeves and his team built their case against Maxwell Sinclair, or Marcus Shepard, as his real identity turned out to be. His mother, Victoria, remained at large despite a multi-state manhunt and her photo appearing on every news broadcast. They've operated this scheme at least 9 times that we can document, Reeves explained during his daily briefing, spreading photographs across the table. 8 women smiled back at them from various snapshots, vibrant, accomplished women whose lives had been extinguished for profit. We've linked Victoria to at least 4 different identities over the past 15 years. Doctor, real estate agent, financial advisor, and now the society matron you met. Why aren't they more famous? Cassie asked, examining the case files with a mixture of horror and analytical interest. You'd think serial killers with this many victims would be household names. Because they're smart, Reeves replied grimly. Different jurisdictions, different methods, different names. They never stayed in one place long enough to establish a pattern that would trigger a joint investigation. Plus, they targeted women who were often isolated to begin with, widows whose children lived far away, women estranged from family, women whose deaths wouldn't immediately raise suspicions. He glanced at Audrey. You're actually their most well-connected victim. They must have really wanted that trust fund. Audrey flinched at being called a victim, even with the qualifier attempted that Reeves had diplomatically omitted. That's what she was, technically. A target, a mark, prey. The terminology made her feel helpless, diminished. She had spent the past 5 years rebuilding herself after David's death, finding strength she never knew she possessed. To be reduced to a victim now seemed an additional cruelty. What's Marcus, telling you? Helena asked, adjusting the sling that held her injured arm. Enough to save his own skin, Reeves said. He claims Victoria masterminded everything, that he was just a pawn in her games. According to him, she groomed him from childhood for this life, taught him how to charm, how to lie, how to identify vulnerable women. And you believe him? Audrey asked quietly. Reeves considered this. I believe he's minimizing his role. But the evidence does suggest Victoria is the primary architect. She has medical training from decades ago, dropped out of medical school in her 3rd year, but retained enough knowledge to access and administer various poisons. The arsenic in your soup wasn't her first choice. It was just what she had on hand when you became their target. The casual way he referenced her narrowly avoided murder made Audrey's stomach clench. If not for Cassie, she would be just another photograph in that tragic array. I have some potentially good news, Reeves continued. Marcus gave us access to his email accounts, and we found communications with Victoria about meeting someone tonight, apparently a document forger who creates new identities for them when they need to disappear. Local police are setting up surveillance at the meeting point. With any luck, we'll have her in custody by morning. The prospect of Victoria's capture should have brought relief, but Audrey felt oddly hollow. Apprehending the woman wouldn't undo the damage to her sense of security, her ability to trust, her belief in her own judgment. Those might take much longer to recover than the legal aspects of the case. After Reeves departed with promises to update them immediately if Victoria was captured, Cassie turned to her mother with determined optimism. This could be over soon, Mom. Then we can start to move forward. Forward to what? Audrey asked, the question escaping before she could temper it. Back to my empty townhouse? Back to my life of carefully scheduled client meetings and silent dinners alone? Back to watching you flourish in your career while I gradually become the lonely old widow that made me such a perfect target in the first place. The rawness of her pain hung in the air. Helena quietly excused herself to the bedroom, giving mother and daughter privacy. Cassie looked stricken. Mom, that's not how I see you at all. Maybe not, Audrey conceded, but it's how I've been seeing myself. Why do you think Maxwell's attention meant so much to me? He made me feel visible again, desirable, alive. Her voice caught. I was so pathetically grateful for his interest that I ignored every warning sign. You weren't pathetic, Cassie insisted. You were human. Anyone would want connection after losing their partner. Your father never would have fallen for such an obvious predator, Audrey said bitterly. Dad wasn't perfect either, Mom. Cassie's gentle reminder held a firmness that made Audrey look up sharply. He kept a multi-million-dollar trust fund secret from you for your entire marriage. That's not exactly the pinnacle of healthy relationship behavior. The observation was so unexpected that Audrey laughed despite herself. A short, startled sound that somehow broke the tension. You're right. Your father was wonderfully loving, but stubborn as hell. He thought he was protecting us, but he was also controlling something that should have been a shared decision. Cassie's phone chimed with an incoming text. She checked it and frowned slightly. It's work. The prototype launch can't move forward without my approval on some code changes. They need me on a video call. She looked at her mother apologetically. I hate to do this now, but go, Audrey insisted. Your career can't stop because my life imploded. Helena and I will be fine. There are officers right outside. After confirming with the security detail stationed in the hallway, Cassie set up her laptop at the small dining table, soon immersed in technical discussions with her team. Audrey watched her daughter in action. Confident, authoritative, respected by colleagues a decade her senior. Proud as she was, a small part of her ached at the contrast between Cassie's purposeful life and her own shattered one. Helena emerged from the bedroom and joined Audrey on the sofa. She's remarkable, she said, following Audrey's gaze to Cassie. Just like her mother. Me? Audrey shook her head. I fell apart the minute David died. I'm still falling apart. Is that how you remember it? Helena asked with genuine curiosity. Because what I saw was a woman who held it together through unimaginable grief, who got up every day and ran a business and raised an incredible daughter, who never once used her loss as an excuse to neglect her responsibilities or treat others poorly. She placed her good hand over Audrey's. Strength isn't about not feeling pain, Audrey. It's about continuing to live fully despite it. The simple wisdom in Helena's words penetrated the walls of self-recrimination Audrey had been building. Before she could respond, Cassie ended her call and rejoined them, her expression troubled. What's wrong? Audrey asked immediately. Nothing work-related, Cassie assured her. But while I was on the call, I got a strange email. She turned her laptop so they could see the screen. It came from an anonymous account, but the subject line is, "For Audrey Winters." The three women stared at the unopened email. It could be from Victoria, Helena said, what they were all thinking. Should we call Detective Reeves? Audrey asked. Cassie hesitated. Let me run a quick security scan first to make sure there's nothing malicious attached. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, executing commands that meant nothing to Audrey, but clearly satisfied her daughter. It's clean, just text. No trackers, no malware. Taking a deep breath, she opened the email. Audrey, it began without preamble, by now you know who we are and what we do. What you don't know is why you specifically were chosen. It wasn't just about money. Ask your sister-in-law about September 17th, 1987. Ask her what really happened that night. Ask her who was really driving the car. Some debts can never be repaid, but collection must still be attempted. V. The blood drained from Helena's face as she read the message. Her hand trembled so violently that her water glass slipped from her grasp, shattering on the hardwood floor. Helena! Audrey turned to her sister-in-law in alarm. What is she talking about? What happened in 1987? Helena's eyes were fixed on some distant point, seeing not the apartment but something long buried in her past. I need to call Reeves, she whispered. Right now. 20 minutes later, Detective Reeves arrived at the safe house, visibly tense. The operation to capture Victoria has been compromised, he announced without preamble. He never showed at the meeting point. We think she knew we were waiting. Of course she knew, Helena said, her earlier shock now replaced by a grim resignation. She's always been 3 steps ahead of everyone. Reeves's eyes narrowed. You know who she really is, don't you? That's what this email is about. Helena nodded slowly. I didn't recognize her at first. It's been over 35 years, and she's had extensive work done. But the way she held her teacup at the hospital when I visited Audrey last week, that's what triggered the memory. A certain precision in her movements that I should have recognized immediately. She took a shuddering breath. Her real name is Valerie Mercer. At least, that's what it was when I knew her. And how exactly did you know her? Reeves prompted when Helena fell silent. We were roommates in college, pre-med students at Northwestern. Helena's voice had taken on a detached quality, as if she were reciting facts about strangers rather than her own history. Valerie, myself, and my then-boyfriend, Thomas Harrington. We were inseparable for 2 years. studied together, partied together, shared everything. Her eyes flickered to Audrey. September 17th, 1987, was the night of a big fraternity party. We'd all been drinking heavily. Thomas was supposed to be the designated driver, but he'd secretly been drinking too. There was an accident on the way home. What kind of accident? Audrey asked quietly. Helena's hands twisted in her lap. Thomas lost control on a curve. The car went through a guardrail and down an embankment, rolling several times before hitting a tree. Valerie was in the back seat and was thrown partially through the windshield. She survived, but her face was… Helena gestured vaguely. She needed multiple reconstructive surgeries. Her medical career was over before it began. She couldn't return to school for over a year, and by then she'd lost her scholarship and her confidence. And Thomas? Reeves asked. Walked away without a scratch, Helena replied bitterly. As did I. But here's what Valerie is referring to in the email, what she wants Audrey to know. Thomas wasn't driving that night. I was. The revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud. I panicked after the crash, Helena continued, unable to meet Audrey's eyes. Thomas suggested we switch places before the ambulance arrived. Make it look like he had been driving. He had a clean record, and I'd had a previous DUI in high school. I would have faced serious charges, lost my future. So we did it. We left Valerie bleeding in the wreckage, moved Thomas to the driver's seat, and created our story. Did Valerie know? Cassie asked, her expression a mixture of shock and calculation, as if assembling puzzle pieces. Not at first, Helena said, but about a year later, she figured it out. Thomas had let something slip when visiting her in the hospital. She confronted me, threatened to go to the police. I begged her not to, offered her money, which she refused. Then Thomas stepped in with a different kind of offer. What kind of offer? Reeves leaned forward intently. Marriage. Helena's laugh was hollow. He proposed to Valerie, told her he'd always been in love with her, said he'd take care of her forever, pay for all her remaining surgeries, give her the life she deserved. She shook her head at the memory. I was stunned, but also secretly relieved. I thought it meant she'd forgiven us, that she wanted to move forward as a family. But that's not what happened, Audrey guessed, a sick feeling growing in her stomach. No. 3 days before the wedding, Thomas disappeared with $50,000 of Valerie's remaining insurance settlement money. We never saw him again. Helena finally raised her eyes to meet Audrey's. Don't you see the pattern? The betrayal she experienced shaped her. She and Marcus. They target people who remind them of those who hurt them. Thomas was charming, handsome, from a good family, like Maxwell appears to be. And David? Audrey whispered. Where does he fit into this? Elena's face crumpled. David was my brother. My baby brother who idolized me, who defended me fiercely when the Thomas situation imploded. The brother who held me when I finally confessed the full truth about the accident, including the fact that I had been driving. The brother who helped me rebuild my life afterward. She's been planning this for decades, Cassie realized aloud. Tracking your family, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But why now? Audrey asked. Why wait 35 years? Because she needed me to witness it, Helena replied, a tear sliding down her cheek. She needed me to watch my beloved brother's wife, the woman he cherished most in the world, be destroyed by the same kind of betrayal that destroyed her. And she needed to use a charming fraud to do it, just like Thomas. Detective Reeves stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. This changes our entire approach. If this is about revenge rather than just money, Victoria, Valerie, is even more dangerous than we thought. He stepped into the hallway to make his calls, issuing rapid-fire instructions to his team. Left alone with the revelation that had shattered their understanding of the case, Audrey, Cassie, and Helena sat in stunned silence. I am so sorry, Helena finally said, her voice breaking. All of this, everything you've been through, it's because of my cowardice all those years ago. If I had taken responsibility for my actions, Valerie might have found peace instead of plotting revenge. David might still be alive. "What do you mean?" Audrey asked sharply. "David died of a heart attack. It was sudden but natural." Helena couldn't meet her eyes. "I've always wondered. Valerie had medical training, access to drugs that could simulate cardiac arrest, and she sent me a condolence card after his funeral. It was the first contact I'd had with her since college. Just a plain white card with 2 words inside. One down." The implication was too horrible to contemplate. Cassie made a small, strangled sound. "You think she murdered David?" Audrey's voice was barely audible. "As part of some decades-long revenge scheme?" "I don't know for certain," Helena admitted. "But after seeing what she tried to do to you, and learning about the other women she and Marcus have targeted, I fear the worst." Reeves returned before Audrey could process this devastating possibility. "We've got a potential lead on Valerie's location. An officer recognized her from a gas station surveillance camera about 30 miles from here. She's changed her appearance. Dark wig, different clothes, but it's definitely her. And she's heading this way." "How is that possible?" Cassie demanded. "She can't know where we are. This is a police safe house." Reeves's expression was grim. "Someone accessed the secure database where your location was registered. We're investigating who, but right now, we need to move you immediately." As they hastily gathered their few belongings, Audrey felt a strange calm descend over her. The woman who had targeted her family, who might have taken David from her, who had tried to poison her and was now hunting her down. This wasn't some faceless evil. This was a wounded human being whose pain had curdled into something monstrous over decades. "I want to talk to her," she announced as they prepared to leave. 3 shocked faces turned toward her. "Absolutely not," Reeves said firmly. "Mom? That's insane," Cassie added. But it was Helena's quiet response that Audrey heard most clearly. "You think you can reach the person she was before all this happened?" It wasn't a question, but Audrey nodded anyway. "This has to end, Helena. Not just with an arrest, but with understanding, with truth. Otherwise, she'll find a way to continue this from prison, or after serving her sentence. People driven by revenge, that powerful, don't simply stop because of legal consequences." "It's too dangerous," Reeves insisted. "More dangerous than living the rest of my life looking over my shoulder?" Audrey countered. "More dangerous than wondering if the woman who might have killed my husband will someday target my daughter? No, I need to face her, not as a victim, but as someone offering a different path forward." The determination in her voice must have conveyed her resolve, because Reeves's expression shifted from outright refusal to reluctant consideration. "If, and this is a massive if, we could arrange a secure, controlled meeting, what exactly would you hope to accomplish?" he asked. Audrey looked at Helena, whose guilt had aged her 10 years in the past hour, and at Cassie, whose protective instincts were visibly at war with her respect for her mother's agency. "Closure," Audrey said simply. "For all of us." The meeting was arranged with military precision. The location, an interview room at police headquarters downtown, surrounded by armed officers with Reeves and his partner monitoring from an adjacent observation area. Audrey sat alone at the metal table, her hands folded calmly before her, despite the storm of emotions raging within. They had debated this plan for hours, Cassie arguing fiercely against it, Helena torn between protective instincts and a desperate hope for resolution, Reeves skeptical, but ultimately willing to trust Audrey's intuition. "She'll be here in 2 minutes," Reeves's voice announced through the small speaker on the wall. "Remember, we're right next door. Say the code word David if you feel threatened in any way, and we'll end this immediately." Audrey nodded, though she had no intention of using the escape hatch they'd provided. Whatever happened in this room needed to reach its natural conclusion, for better or worse. 5 years of widowhood had taught her that incomplete endings were sometimes more painful than devastating ones. The door opened and Valerie Mercer entered, escorted by 2 officers who then retreated to stand guard outside. Gone was the refined silver chignon and elegant attire of Victoria Sinclair. This woman wore a simple gray prison jumpsuit, her hair now its natural gray and pulled back in a functional ponytail, her face devoid of makeup. Without the careful artifice, Audrey could see traces of the college girl in the photographs Helena had shown her, the bright-eyed medical student whose life had been derailed by a single catastrophic night. The officers had removed Valerie's handcuffs before bringing her in, a concession Audrey had insisted upon. This conversation couldn't happen with one party literally in chains, regardless of the crimes she had committed. "Hello, Audrey," Valerie said, her voice lacking the cultured accent she'd affected as Victoria. "I must say, this is an unexpected invitation. Please, sit," Audrey replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. Valerie complied, studying Audrey with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen. "I assume Helena finally told you everything? About the accident? About Thomas?" "Yes," Audrey confirmed, "though I suspect there's more to the story than even she knows." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed Valerie's face before she masked it. "Such as?" "Such as what really happened to my husband," Audrey said, the words steady despite the grief that threatened to choke them. "Did you kill David?" Valerie's expression remained impassive, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, seemed to assess how much Audrey actually knew versus what she was guessing. "Would it matter if I had? Would it change anything?" "It would change everything," Audrey replied. "Not the fact of his death. Nothing can change that. But understanding why he died? That matters immensely." For a long moment, Valerie was silent, her gaze distant as if seeing through the concrete walls to some place only she could access. "I didn't kill David," she finally said, her voice softer than before, though not for lack of consideration. Relief flooded through Audrey so powerfully that she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. Though she had tried to prepare for either answer, hearing that David's death had indeed been natural lifted an unbearable weight. "I tracked Helena for decades," Valerie continued, seeming to find freedom in finally telling her story. "After Thomas disappeared with my money, I was left with nothing. No education, no future, a face that required constant surgeries I couldn't afford. I spent years just surviving, working menial jobs, saving every penny for the next procedure." Her fingers unconsciously traced the faint scars along her jawline. "But I never stopped watching Helena, and by extension, her perfect little brother, with his perfect life and his perfect family." "Why didn't you expose her?" Audrey asked. "You could have gone to the police with the truth about the accident even years later." "The statute of limitations had expired," Valerie replied with a dismissive wave. "Besides, legal justice seemed too impersonal, too quick. I wanted Helena to suffer slowly, to lose everything she valued, just as I had." A cold smile touched her lips. "When David died unexpectedly, it seemed like divine intervention. The first phase of my revenge delivered without me lifting a finger." "So you sent her the card," Audrey said. "One down." "I couldn't resist," Valerie admitted. "I wanted her to know I was still there, still watching, that his death was just the beginning." She leaned forward slightly. "But here's what's truly interesting, Audrey. After David died, I began watching you. I expected grief, of course, depression, withdrawal, but what I saw instead was strength, resilience. You built a life without him. A different life, yes, but one with purpose and dignity. And that surprised you," Audrey realized aloud. "It fascinated me," Valerie corrected. "You see, I had spent 35 years defining myself by what I had lost. My face, my future, my trust in humanity. But you defined yourself by what remained. Your daughter, your business, your capacity to continue living fully despite profound loss." For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across her features. "It made me wonder, what might have been possible if I had chosen a different path. It's not too late, Audrey said quietly. Valerie's laugh was harsh. I've killed 7 women, Audrey. I've orchestrated elaborate schemes to destroy lives for the pure satisfaction of watching people suffer as I suffered. There is no redemption for someone like me. I'm not talking about redemption, Audrey clarified, or forgiveness, or absolution, or any of those concepts that let people avoid real accountability. I'm talking about truth, about finally allowing the full story to be told. Not just Helena's part in it, but yours too. What difference would that make now? It would mean that your life story isn't solely defined by what others did to you, or even by what you did in response, Audrey replied. It would mean acknowledging that you were both victim and perpetrator, that you had genuine grievances and made devastating choices in response to them. Something shifted in Valerie's expression, a crack in the facade of cold calculation she had maintained. You sound like my therapist from the psychiatric hospital, the one I saw briefly after Thomas left. She grimaced at the memory. She said trauma doesn't excuse cruelty, but it does explain it. That understanding the connection was the first step toward breaking it. Smart woman, Audrey commented. I fired her after 3 sessions, Valerie countered. Started planning my first identity change instead. Her eyes narrowed. Why are you really here, Audrey? What do you want from me? The truth about Marcus, Audrey said simply. Is he really your son? The question clearly caught Valerie off guard. What? Helena mentioned that you and Thomas were together for 2 years before the accident. The timing would be right, and there's something in Marcus's features, especially around the eyes, that reminds me of the college photos she showed me of Thomas. Valerie's mask slipped completely, a complex mix of emotions washing across her face. Pain, pride, bitterness, and something that might have been love. Very observant, she finally said. Yes. Marcus is Thomas's biological son. I was 8 weeks pregnant the night of the crash. Thomas never knew. I hadn't told him yet. I was planning to announce it the night of the fraternity party, but after all the drinking and the accident, the moment never came. So when Thomas proposed to you afterward, he was unknowingly offering to marry the mother of his child, Valerie confirmed. The ultimate irony. And when he disappeared with my money, he was abandoning not just me, but his unborn son. Her voice hardened. I raised Marcus alone, shaped him in my image, taught him everything he needed to know about the world and the cruelty it contained. You molded him into a weapon, Audrey said, unable to keep the horror from her voice. I molded him into a survivor, Valerie corrected sharply. In a world where people like Helena and Thomas face no consequences for destroying lives, Marcus and I created our own justice. By destroying more lives? Audrey challenged. Those women you targeted, they never harmed you. They were innocent, just as you were innocent before the accident. For the first time, Valerie's composure cracked completely. Don't you think I know that? She hissed, leaning forward. Don't you think I see their faces every night when I close my eyes? The difference is, I don't care. Caring about strangers in a world where your own flesh and blood can betray you is a luxury I discarded decades ago. Along with any chance at peace, Audrey observed quietly. Peace was never an option for me, Valerie replied, though with less conviction than before. Audrey reached slowly into her pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, placing it on the table between them. This arrived by courier this morning. It's from Marcus. Valerie's eyes widened slightly, her hand automatically reaching for the paper before hesitating. What does it say? I don't know. It's addressed to you. Audrey pushed it closer. The police have already examined it for any coded messages or escape plans. It's just a letter. With surprising delicacy for hands that had mixed poison meant for Audrey just days ago, Valerie unfolded the paper. Her eyes moved rapidly across the page, her expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief to something Audrey couldn't quite name. A complex emotion that seemed to age and soften her simultaneously. "He's confessing to everything," Valerie said, her voice barely audible, taking full responsibility for all of it. "The murders, the cons, everything. Says I was just along for the ride, that I tried to stop him several times." She looked up at Audrey, genuine confusion in her eyes. "This is a lie. I was the architect. He was my instrument." "He's trying to save you," Audrey said gently, "just as you tried to protect him by molding him into someone who couldn't be hurt, the way you were. The tragedy is that in armoring him against pain, you prevented him from developing the capacity for genuine connection." Valerie stared at the letter, her hands now visibly trembling. "He's offering himself as sacrifice." "Why would he do that?" "Because despite everything, he loves you," Audrey replied simply. "And love, real love, is about protecting others, not exploiting them. Somewhere beneath the person you trained him to be, he learned that truth anyway." The realization seemed to hit Valerie physically, as though she'd been struck. She pressed her hand against her mouth, the letter crumpling slightly in her grip. For perhaps the first time in 35 years, she was confronting the possibility that her entire worldview might be fundamentally flawed. "I won't let him do this," she said finally, straightening with new resolve. "I won't let him pay for my crimes." "Then tell the truth," Audrey urged. "All of it. About Helena, about Thomas, about everything that came after. Not to excuse what you did, but to provide context, to help prevent others from following the same destructive path." Valerie studied her with genuine curiosity. "You're a remarkable woman, Audrey Winters. I chose you because you reminded me of myself before everything fell apart. Intelligent, loving, resilient. I thought destroying you would somehow destroy the shadow of who I might have been." She shook her head slowly. "Instead, you're sitting here trying to save me from myself." "I'm not trying to save you," Audrey corrected. "I'm trying to honor the woman you were before tragedy rewrote your story. The medical student who wanted to heal rather than harm. The expectant mother who must have felt such joy before it all fell apart. Something broke in Valerie then. A dam that had held back decades of grief and rage and loss. Her shoulders sagged as the carefully constructed persona of Victoria Sinclair, avenging angel, collapsed completely, revealing the wounded human being beneath. "I was going to be a pediatric surgeon," she whispered, the words emerging as if from some long-sealed crypt of memory. "I had such plans for us, Thomas, the baby, and me. We were going to change the world." A single tear traced the path of a faint scar down her cheek. "How did I become this monster instead?" "One choice at a time," Audrey replied softly. "And you can unmake yourself the same way, beginning with what you tell Detective Reeves when he comes through that door." Their eyes met across the table. Two women whose lives had been shaped by loss, who had responded to grief in radically different ways. In Valerie's gaze, Audrey saw a flicker of something that had been absent in their previous encounter. Recognition. Not of an enemy or a target, but of a fellow traveler through pain. "I'll tell him everything," Valerie said finally. "Not for myself. It's far too late for that. But for Marcus. And for those women whose lives I took." She straightened slightly. "And for the medical student who wanted to heal the world before she decided to burn it down instead." When Reeves entered minutes later, Valerie began speaking without prompting. A full confession that continued for hours, documented meticulously by court reporters and witnessed by prosecutors from multiple jurisdictions. She provided names, dates, methods, financial records, all the evidence needed to close numerous cold cases and bring closure to families who had lived for years without understanding why their loved ones had died. In the observation room, Audrey sat between Helena and Cassie, watching the woman who had nearly destroyed them dismantle her life's dark work with the same methodical precision she had once used to construct it. "Will it be enough?" Helena asked quietly, her hand clutching Audrey's. "For the families of those women, I mean. Will knowing the truth really help them heal?" "It won't bring their loved ones back," Audrey replied, thinking of her own journey after David's death. But living with uncertainty can be its own special hell. At least now they'll have a complete story, even if it's a tragic one. Cassie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the day's events, suddenly spoke. "I've been thinking about the trust fund Grandpa left, the one Dad kept secret." Audrey turned to her daughter, curious about this apparent non sequitur. "What about it?" "I think we should use it to establish a foundation," Cassie continued, her analytical mind clearly having been working on this idea for some time. "For women rebuilding their lives after loss, whether from death, divorce, or other circumstances. A place where they can find community, financial counseling, emotional support, all the things that might have prevented someone like Valerie from turning her pain outward." The simplicity and rightness of the idea brought tears to Audrey's eyes. "David would have loved that," she said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "The David Winters Foundation for New Beginnings," Helena suggested, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "A way to honor his memory while helping prevent future tragedies." As Valerie continued her confession in the next room, systematically dismantling the web of deception and violence she had spent decades constructing, Audrey felt something shift within her own heart. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. The woman who had targeted her family would face justice for her crimes, but the greater victory was in breaking the cycle of pain and retribution that had claimed so many lives. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Audrey stood at the podium of a converted Victorian mansion that now served as the headquarters of the David Winters Foundation. Behind her, a photograph of David smiled down at the assembled crowd. Journalists, community leaders, and most importantly, women who had come seeking support as they navigated their own journeys through loss and renewal. Grief can either destroy us or transform us, Audrey began, her voice steady and clear. The choice isn't always easy to see when we're in the depths of pain. Sometimes we need others to illuminate the path forward, to remind us that our stories don't end with loss, but continue through it. In the front row, Cassie sat beside Helena, both women radiating pride as they watched Audrey speak with the quiet authority of someone who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but undefeated. "Today we open these doors to anyone seeking to write a new chapter after loss," Audrey continued. "Whether you're here for practical assistance, emotional support, or simply to be in the company of others who understand, know that your journey matters, your healing matters, your future matters." Sturdy. As she concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Audrey caught sight of an envelope that had been placed discreetly on the corner of the podium, cream-colored stationery with her name written in an unfamiliar hand. Opening it later in the privacy of her office, she found a brief note and a check for $1 million, drawn on an account she'd never heard of. "For new beginnings," the note read simply. "Some debts can never be repaid, but amends must still be attempted. V." The irony of Valerie Mercer's words being repurposed from threat to offering wasn't lost on Audrey. The check would be thoroughly investigated before being accepted, of course, but the gesture itself represented something profound, an acknowledgement that even after decades of traveling the wrong path, course correction remained possible. That evening, as Audrey sat on the porch of her new home, smaller than her previous townhouse but filled with warmth and carefully chosen treasures from her life with David, she felt his presence beside her as tangibly as the autumn breeze, not as a ghost or a supernatural visitation, but as the accumulation of love and memories that had shaped her into the woman she had become. "I think you'd be proud," she whispered to the empty chair beside her. "Not just of the foundation, but of how we've all moved forward. Cassie, with her promotion. Helena finally facing her past. Even me," she smiled softly. "Especially me." From inside came the sounds of laughter as Cassie and her fiancé Michael prepared dinner in the kitchen, a Sunday tradition they had established in recent months. Life had found its rhythm again, different from before but equally meaningful. The sapphire pendant David had given her still hung at her throat, catching the last golden rays of sunset. Audrey touched it gently, feeling not the crushing weight of grief that had once accompanied memories of him, but a gentle gratitude for the time they'd shared and the family they'd created together. Some losses could never be fully recovered from. Some wounds never completely healed. But in the space between what was and what might be, Audrey had discovered something unexpected: the capacity to carry both her past and her future with equal grace, neither diminishing the other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of pink and gold, she welcomed the coming night without fear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new connections, and she would face them all with the hard-won wisdom of someone who understood that life's greatest beauty often emerged from its deepest sorrows, not as compensation for pain, but as testament to the enduring human capacity for renewal. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.